Cake? No need for it. Go ahead and toss it out. That's what my husband said on my birthday and had the audacity to go on a trip with his mistress. I had hoped this would be our last chance, but it seems I was mistaken. I really don't think I can continue living with you anymore. Understood. In that case, I'll do as you said. Throw out the cake, and I'll throw out something else that's important to you as well. And then prepare yourself because I'm going to throw out thing that is most unnecessary to me. My name is Sarah. I'm a 28-year-old office worker. My husband Bob also works in an office, although it's a different company. We don't have any children. Bob and I met a year ago. It was at a party held by a senior colleague from work. I'm rather plain, a bit overweight, introverted, and gloomy. And my hobby is reading comic books, an indoor type of person. So I was invited to the party only to make up the numbers. Also, I knew this, so I didn't join the conversation much and was just drinking my beverage at the edge of the table. Still, out of all the participants there, Bob, who was the most handsome, outgoing, and good at conversing, for some reason, actively started talking to me. Bob enjoys traveling and collecting vintage vinyl records. And he told me stories about his travels and old music, which were really interesting. When it was time to go home, he asked for my contact details. And though I was surprised, we exchanged our contact information on Facebook. And the very next day, he messaged me, "I'd like to meet up, just the two of us next time." I was so surprised that at first, I wondered if this was some kind of punishment game, or if he was going to try to sell me something. But I was happy, so I agreed. And we had a meal together on a later date. After that, he frequently asked me out. And after a few dates, he confessed his feelings for me. I had never had a boyfriend in my life before, so I was overjoyed at my first ever confession and accepted it. And then, about 3 months after we started dating, he proposed, and we got married. I thought it was like a dream that someone as ordinary and boring as me could marry such a wonderful person. And I believed that a happy life was about to start. But as soon as we got married, Bob's attitude completely changed. When we were dating, he was very kind. But once we got married, he started pushing all the household chores on me and would just laze around watching TV or listening to records in his room when he got back from work. I don't know if it's because the volume of the records is loud, but when I call out, "Dinner's ready," he doesn't seem to hear me and often doesn't come right away, which irritates me. On his days off, he leaves me alone and goes out to play, saying he has plans with friends or colleagues from work. When I say, "Please help me with the household chores a little," he replies, "I'm working, you know." When I tell him, "I'm working too. I'd appreciate it if you could at least help with the household chores on your days off," he says, "I'm busy even on my days off because I have to hang out with my friends, unlike you, who don't have many friends because you're so gloomy." Ain't that last remark just awful? Sure, I'm not exactly Miss Social Butterfly due to my personality, I get it, but to say such things to my face, that's just plain rude, ain't it? That was what I thought, but I didn't want to start a fight, so I kept it to myself. Gradually, Bob started nitpicking about the way I cook and clean, and before long, he started hurling insults like, "You should be grateful that a great guy like me even bothered to marry a plain and overweight woman like you." I thought a real gentleman wouldn't say such things to his wife, and would also help with housework. In fact, if he's got issues with the way I clean, I wish he'd at least clean his own room. The only thing he takes care of is his record collection. Also, I love reading comic books, and I've collected quite a few over the years, but one day, I found that all the comic books I had in my room had vanished. I asked Bob, suspecting the worst, and he said, "Oh, those? They were in the way, so I threw them out." I can't believe it. Those were important to me. Some of them were even out of print. Hard to get. I protested, but he just said, "Well, your comic books were starting to overflow from your room into the living room. Besides, you should outgrow this childish hobby of reading comic books." How dare he criticize my hobbies? Not to mention, throwing away my stuff without even asking me. Unforgivable. If he's going to be this awful and verbally abusive, why did he even marry me? Probably Bob just wanted a free housekeeper, I guess. And when he met me at a party and saw that I was quiet and submissive, he must have thought I was an easy target. Realizing this, I've spent many nights crying in bed. It's manageable now, but if we were to have kids, I shudder to think what the future might hold. One day, A friend told me she saw Bob walking arm in arm with a woman who wasn't me in the hotel district. Just yesterday, he said he was going out to meet a friend. I was under the impression that this friend was a man. What does it mean he was meeting a woman? Could he be cheating? With these suspicions, I hired a private investigator. As expected, it turned out that Bob was cheating on me. The other woman was a junior colleague from his office, a woman named Susan. He had been cheating on me since we got married. Whenever he said he was going out to meet friends or colleagues, it was mostly dates with Susan. How dare he dump all the housework on me and then play around? I'm going to divorce him, I thought, and even consulted a lawyer. But even so, I couldn't completely hate Bob, who allowed even a plain and boring woman like me to dream a little about marriage. So, I decided to make one last bet. This coming Saturday is my birthday. If Bob would celebrate the day with me, I thought I would hold off on the divorce. At dinner, I said to Bob, Bob, do you remember what's coming up this Saturday? Huh, Saturday? Is there something special going on? I was a little shocked to realize that he had completely forgotten. At this point, my hopes were dashed again, but I continued the conversation. It's my birthday. Oh yeah, now that you mention it. Well, it falls on a day off this year, so I was thinking of getting a cake and having it together. Ah, you promise, right? Absolutely do not make any other plans, okay? With a somewhat praying feeling, Sarah said this to Bob, who seemed reluctant. And then it was the Friday before her birthday. During dinner, Bob said, I have a business trip tomorrow. What? Tomorrow is my birthday, and we promised to eat cake together. I've already made a reservation. When I said that, he said, well, it's work. I can't help it. Show some understanding for your husband's work. Anyway, I'm going on a business trip tomorrow. It's for 2 days and 1 night. So I'll be back on Sunday evening. Please pack for me. Well, what about the cake I reserved? When I asked, just throw it away if you don't need it, he casually said, what is that? Despite it being my special birthday and going through the trouble of reserving a cake, he so nonchalantly said to throw it away. Is it really a business trip? Feeling suspicious, I checked his smartphone while Bob was in the shower. There, I found his exchanges with his mistress. Shall we go somewhere on a trip this Saturday for 2 days and 1 night? Sounds good. I want to go camping. How about it? Then I'll make a reservation at a lodge. Are you sure your wife hasn't found out? Are you okay? I'm okay. She's oblivious. Actually, this Saturday is Sarah's birthday. She said let's celebrate together, but it's a hassle. I don't want her to start demanding gifts and stuff, so I thought I'd go on a trip with you. Wow, that's terrible. Your wife must be so sad. I almost cried from the shock, but somehow managed to hold back and took a screenshot of their conversation on my smartphone. I didn't particularly want gifts or anything. If you had simply agreed to eat cake with me, I would have still had a glimmer of belief that you might care about me a bit. Seeing the messages between you and your mistress shattered that last bit of hope. Enough. I'm done with it. Then, on my birthday, Bob so audaciously demanding at the front door. Well, I'm heading out. While I'm on a business trip, clean my room for me. Okay. By the way, I'm going to pick up the cake we reserved today. You still want me to throw away your share of the cake, right? You're nagging. I said it's fine. Understood. I'll clean your room, and I'll throw away anything that I think you don't need anymore. That's okay with you, right? Yeah, it's fine. I'm heading out now. With that, Bob left for what he claimed to be a business trip, but was in reality a trip with his mistress. Remember when I asked, is it okay if I throw away anything I think you don't need? And you said, yeah, it's fine. I recorded our conversation on a voice recorder, so there's no taking it back now. Well, once inside Bob's room, I vacuumed and wiped the windows. Next, I disposed of the unwanted items, old clothes, piles of stationery, and the record collection that Bob had been amassing. It took quite a bit of money and effort to collect those records, I recall. I packed up all these items and put them in the storeroom. Then, I placed the filled-out divorce papers on the living room table and left the house. Now, it's my birthday after all. I'm going to enjoy it just as I like. First, I went to pick up the reserved cake. After that, I booked a room in a luxury hotel I had always wanted to visit and ate the cake in my hotel room. Bob said, throw it away, but I couldn't bring myself to waste food, so I ate both portions. It was delicious, but I might gain weight again, so I really need to start dieting. I then went shopping in the nearby stores and took a stroll by the sea close by. I had spent my days off doing housework until now, so this kind of leisure day was a first in a long time. Just as I was thinking about this, I received a call from Bob on Sunday night. Honestly, I didn't want to answer, but I had no choice. Hello? Hey, where the heck are you? I got back from my business trip, and you're not home, and there's no dinner ready. How annoying. He's ruining the relaxing ambience of my luxury hotel stay. Well, I'm staying in a hotel for a bit, for reasons. There's a lovely sea nearby. Would you like me to send you a picture? What are you talking about? I don't care about that. Why are you in a hotel? Where's my dinner? Also, I found divorce papers. What's going on? What's going on? Well, if there are divorce papers, you should know what to do, right? Are you planning to make a paper airplane with it? You can't be that stupid. Just sign your name on it and take it to the city hall. So, you want a divorce? That's right. Honestly, I'm sick and tired of it. Bob just leaves me alone to play on his day off, and he never helps me with the household chores. From the very beginning, the first thing he does when he calls me is get mad because I haven't prepared dinner. I thought it was unbelievable. What's up with that? And when I looked in the room, my collection of records was gone. What happened? Oh, I threw away the records. As I say that, Bob's voice raises even higher. You threw them away? Are you kidding me? Why? You knew I cherished those. But Bob, you told me before your business trip that I could throw away anything I deemed unnecessary. You said it was okay, so I did. I even have our conversation recorded. Wanna listen? And besides, you also threw away my beloved comics, didn't you? That's... Anyway, don't just drop divorce papers on me and leave. I get it. Then let's meet and talk for once. And so, a few days later, honestly, I didn't want to see Bob anymore. But I had no choice but to have a discussion at the lawyer's office. Bob, whom I hadn't seen in several days, was in shabby clothes and had unkempt hair. I was the one who used to iron his clothes. I think the conditioner was about to run out. Maybe that's why his hair was so messy. But he should be able to buy conditioner by himself, I think. Seeing Bob in such a sloppy state, I wonder why I ever liked such a person. I'm glad. I had worried about how I would feel if I no longer wanted to divorce after seeing Bob again. But it seems that that was needless worry. And then the discussion began. I'll say this first. I haven't changed my mind about wanting to divorce. This is the amount I want as alimony. Seeing the amount I suggested, Bob screamed, $30 million? Sarah, that's way too much. Just because I didn't help with the housework? Just because he didn't help with the housework? What is this man talking about? That's not all. You've also constantly insulted me, calling me fat and plain. And worst of all this, saying that, I pulled out evidence of infidelity that I had researched at the detective agency. I also show him the screenshot of our smartphone conversation at that time. You've been cheating since we got married. Even on my birthday, lying about a business trip to go on a vacation with your mistress? Considering all this, $30 million is still not enough. So, Sarah, did you know about the affair? Looking at the photos, Bob turns pale. Yes. Did you think I didn't notice because I'm dense? Don't make fun of me. And you threw away my beloved comics, remember? But that's because you threw away my records. Oh, the records? I lied about throwing them away. Surprise, Bob, I explain. Actually, I thought about throwing them away, but I felt it would be too cruel. And I didn't want to be held responsible for throwing them away, so I didn't. The records are stored in the back of the storeroom. What? Seeing Bob's relieved face, I say, why are you looking so relieved? The fact that you threw away my comics hasn't changed, so you should compensate for that. And about the cake, you said throw it away? But I couldn't disrespect food, so I ate both portions. So, you didn't throw away anything? When Bob sought confirmation, I told him with a chuckle, there's no need for that. I declared to you, I discard anything I don't need. And I've done just that. Well, actually, I'm about to do it. Huh. Bob seemed unable to comprehend. With a deeper smile, I told him, you. Yes, you. You're the thing I need the least. I'm going to get rid of you completely. Once you understand that, please divorce. There's no way the alimony will be less than this amount. If you argue, it'll be higher. When I said this, Bob pleaded, I'm sorry. I won't cheat anymore. And I'll help with the housework because you're here. Because I'm here? What? So you can go on dates with your mistress without any worry, dumping the chores on me during your days off? No, that's not it. Bob babbled, no matter what you say, I intend a divorce. I don't like holding on to trash because I'm a neat freak. I retorted. After I said that, Bob fell apart, stammering, I'm trash? His expression at that moment was priceless. Afterwards, we divorced. Since the divorce, all communication has been through our lawyer. So I haven't seen Bob since. However, according to stories my lawyer shared, Bob, having left all the housework to me, had no domestic skills. He briefly cohabited with Susan, but apparently she too couldn't do housework. Their place quickly became a mess. Their diet was all over the place because they were constantly eating out. Bob started gaining weight, and his once handsome face now looks quite regrettable. It seems Susan broke up with Bob and moved on to another job. Furthermore, it became gossip at work that Bob and Susan were having an affair, causing him discomfort. But he can't quit because the alimony I requested is substantial. I've switched jobs and moved, and now I'm enjoying living alone. I'm not run ragged by housework like before. No one gives me a hard time, and I'm happy. Plus, maybe because I'm not stressed anymore, my face is brighter, and I've been told I look a little thinner. If I continue to lose weight, even though I don't plan to see him again, I might make The sun was already dipping low in the sky when we finally packed the last of our bags into the car. My husband, barely looking up from his phone, managed a brief, "Ready?" It felt more like we were heading to a business meeting than a weekend getaway. The drive was quiet, too quiet. Every now and then, I tried to start a conversation, but it felt like I was talking to a brick wall. His mind was somewhere else, probably tangled up in work emails and deadlines. I couldn't help but feel a pang of sadness, remembering a time when we'd sing along to the radio, laughing and making plans. Now, it seemed like we were just sharing space, nothing more. Arriving at the cabin felt like stepping into a postcard. It was beautiful, surrounded by trees with leaves rustling in the gentle breeze. This is nice, I said, hoping to break the ice. He nodded, but his smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The distance between us felt like a chasm that no scenic view could bridge. The first night was as awkward as expected. We made small talk over dinner, but the silences were heavy, loaded with things unsaid. Later, in bed, we faced opposite walls, the silence deafening. Morning came too soon. I was greeted by the sound of his voice, not saying good morning to me, but speaking briskly on a work call. I felt a surge of frustration. Here we were, in this beautiful place, and yet we might as well have been 1,000 miles apart. I decided to get some air, hoping the forest could offer what my husband couldn't, peace. At the local store, stocking up on things we'd forgotten, I bumped into Alex. Alex, with that same easy smile and warm eyes that could light up the darkest days. We caught up, laughed, and for a moment, I felt a spark of something familiar, something exciting. It was a dangerous feeling, like playing with fire, but it reminded me that I wasn't just a wife or a background character in someone else's busy life. I was me. Returning to the cabin, I felt a mix of emotions. Guilt, for the thrill I felt with Alex. Sadness, for the state of my marriage. Determination, to not let this weekend be a waste. I wanted to shake my husband, to scream, "Look at me. I'm here, and we're slipping away from each other." But I knew it wasn't that simple. The getaway was supposed to reconnect us, but now I wasn't sure what it would take. I just knew I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. It was time for a change, but how and what remained to be seen. I told him I needed some fresh air, a hike by myself to sort through my thoughts. He didn't question it, just nodded, his eyes glued to his laptop screen. I felt a twinge in my chest, not sure if it was guilt or relief that he didn't press further. Meeting Alex wasn't something I had planned. Not really, but once the idea took hold, it was all I could think about. The cafe was quaint, tucked away on a street I'd never have found without Alex suggesting it. Seeing him there, waiting, something in me relaxed for the first time in months. We talked like old times. His attention on me felt like a balm. I laughed more in that hour than I had in weeks. It was easy to forget, to get lost in the moment. Returning to the cabin was like stepping back into another world. My husband barely looked up as I walked in. "Good walk?" he asked, and I nodded, hating the ease with which the lies slipped out. I showered, letting the guilt wash over me, but it didn't rinse away. He was still working when I joined him in the living area, the glow of the screen illuminating his focused face. I wanted to reach out, to bridge the gap between us, but the words wouldn't come. The days that followed blurred into a pattern of deceit. Each meeting with Alex was a step further away from my husband. I told myself it was just coffee, just lunch, just talking, but I knew it was more. I could feel the distance growing, an emotional chasm that widened with every lie, every stolen moment. My husband's oblivion was a double-edged sword. Part of me wished he'd notice, confront me, fight for us. But he remained absorbed in his work, unaware of the storm brewing under our roof. It was easier this way, I told myself, easier to slip further into the affair. With each passing day, my emotional ties to my husband frayed. It wasn't just the physical betrayal, it was the secrets, the lies, the parts of myself I gave to Alex instead of him. I was losing myself in the deception, each layer of dishonesty distancing me further from the woman I once was. I knew this couldn't last, that the truth would come out eventually. But for now, I was caught in the thrill of the moment, the intoxication of being wanted, seen, in a way I hadn't felt in years. The guilt was always there, lurking in the background, but I pushed it away, convincing myself that I could navigate this tangled web I'd woven. It was a dangerous game, one I wasn't sure I could win, but I was too far in to turn back now. That morning, he was off work, which hardly ever happens. He wanted us to do something together, but I was already miles away in my head, thinking about the weekend. I told him about this wellness retreat I heard from a friend, saying it was something I needed to do alone. He looked disappointed, but he didn't push it. Meeting Alex was becoming the new normal, each time a bit more bold, a bit more reckless. I spun a web of lies to cover my tracks, each one more elaborate than the last. It was like I was someone else, living a double life. One day, while out with Alex, I bumped into a friend. Her eyes widened in shock, then narrowed in suspicion. We talked, and I could see the judgment in her eyes, but she promised she wouldn't tell. Walking away from that conversation, my stomach was in knots. It was getting too close for comfort. Then, there were the expenses. Little things here and there, but they added up. My husband noticed. "What's all this?" he asked, scrolling through our bank statement. "Just some things for myself," I said, trying to sound casual. "Self-care. You know?" He didn't look convinced, but he let it go. The tension in the air was thick, though, like a storm brewing on the horizon. The day he found the gift from Alex was the day everything nearly came crashing down. It was just a small thing, a necklace, but it was enough. "Who's this from?" he asked, holding it up. My heart stopped. "Oh, that? It's from Lisa." I lied, mentioning a friend he rarely met. She thought I could use a pick-me-up. He studied me for a moment, then nodded, though I could see the wheels turning in his head. Our home felt like a battleground, silent and charged. I could see the frustration in his eyes, feel the distance growing between us. I was living a lie, and it was only a matter of time before it all came out. I wanted to stop, to go back to how things were, but I didn't know how. It was like being caught in a current, unable to swim back to shore. The day started like any other, but there was something in the air, a kind of tension I couldn't quite put my finger on. He was quiet at breakfast, more than usual, his eyes on me in a way that felt like he was looking right through me. I brushed it off, telling myself it was just work stress. Little did I know, he had started putting his detective skills to use, watching me closer than ever before. It never even crossed my mind he would do something like that. Why would he? I thought I had been careful, thought I had covered my tracks. But I underestimated him, underestimated what he was capable of when his instincts kicked in. Then there was the day he ran into my friend, the one who had seen me with Alex. I didn't know about their meeting until much later, but when he came home that night, there was a look in his eyes I couldn't quite decipher. Something had shifted, and deep down, I started to feel the first twinges of fear. Using his interrogation skills, he started asking questions. Not directly about Alex or the affair, but little things, probing, testing my answers. I felt like I was constantly on the edge, trying to balance on a tightrope of my own lies. He had been gathering evidence, something I was blissfully unaware of. In my world, wrapped up in the excitement and danger of the affair, I forgot who I was dealing with. A detective, someone trained to see what others miss, to connect dots that on the surface don't seem to connect at all. The special dinner invitation caught me off guard. "I think we need this, just the two of us," he said, and part of me wanted to believe it was a step towards fixing whatever had broken between us. I missed us, missed what we had before all the lies and secrets. So, I said yes, hoping for a night where we could pretend everything was okay. Sitting across from him at that dinner, the atmosphere was charged with an unspoken tension. He was calm, too calm, and it was then I realized this wasn't a dinner to rekindle our relationship. This was something else entirely. The moment of truth, the confrontation I hadn't seen coming but should have. All the lies, the sneaking around, it was all about to come crashing down. And there I was, completely unprepared for the fallout. We sat down for what was supposed to be a special dinner, just the two of us trying to reconnect. But the moment he started speaking, I knew this wasn't about rekindling anything. He laid it all out, every piece of evidence he had gathered about the affair. Photos, messages, receipts. I couldn't believe it. How did it all come to this? At first, I tried to deny it, to make up some story to explain everything away. But it was useless. He had everything laid out so clearly, so methodically, there was no room for doubt. The look in his eyes, it wasn't anger. Not really. It was hurt, deep hurt, and disappointment. That's what got me. I broke down, admitting to everything. It felt like the world was falling apart around us. The emotional fallout was immediate and devastating. We both sat there, in a kind of stunned silence, the air heavy with everything that had just been laid bare. Our marriage, once something so strong and certain, now felt fragile, like it could shatter at any moment. Then came the ultimatum. It was simple and stark. End the affair and commit to counseling, or it was over, divorce. I felt like I was at a crossroads, not just about our marriage, but about who I wanted to be. I chose us, chose to end the affair and try to mend what I had broken. Telling Alex was one of the hardest things I've ever done, not because I wanted to stay with him, but because it made everything so real. Ending it, hearing the finality in my voice, it was like waking up from a dream, a very bad dream. The counseling sessions were tough, each one a step through the pain and betrayal, but we were doing it together, working through the layers of hurt and mistrust. It wasn't easy. There were days I thought it was too much, that we couldn't get past it. But then there were moments, small ones, where I could see us, the real us, starting to emerge again. It was a long road, filled with ups and downs. But that confrontation, as painful as it was, started us on the path to healing. It was a reminder of how much we had to lose and what we were fighting to save. After everything that happened, after the confrontation and the tears, we started the slow process of rebuilding. It wasn't like flipping a switch. It was more like trying to piece together a shattered vase, knowing it would never look the same again. But maybe, we thought, it could still hold water, still be beautiful in its own way. Trust, that was the biggest hurdle. Every time he looked at me, I could see the shadow of doubt in his eyes. It hurt, knowing I was the cause of that. We had long talks, the kind where every word weighed a ton, trying to lay a new foundation for our relationship. It was exhausting, trying to rebuild trust brick by brick. We set new rules, new boundaries for our relationship. Communication was the key. We kept hearing from our counselor. So, we talked and talked, even when it was the last thing we wanted to do. It felt like walking a tightrope, trying to find the balance between honesty and too much information. To bring back some spark, some joy, we started doing new things together. Hiking on weekends, taking a cooking class, anything to feel connected again. It was awkward at first, like we were strangers trying to be friends. But slowly, laughter returned, filling up the empty spaces between us. I also started seeing a therapist on my own. I needed to understand why I did what I did, why I risked everything for something that was never real. It was hard, facing those ugly parts of myself, but necessary. I couldn't fix us if I didn't fix me first. Our lives became an open book. No more secrets, no more lies. It was scary, living like that, but also liberating. There was a comfort in knowing that there was nothing left to hide, that the worst had already happened and we were still here, still trying. Forgiveness didn't come all at once. It was more like a slow thaw after a harsh winter, bits of green emerging from the snow. There were good days and bad days, days when the hurt seemed too much to bear, and days when hope felt within reach. But gradually, the good days started to outnumber the bad. It wasn't easy, rebuilding from the ashes of our old life. But piece by piece, we were doing it. Forgiveness, we learned, wasn't just a moment of grace, but a journey we were walking together. And with each step, we were coming closer to something new, something stronger. The day we renewed our vows was quiet, just us and a few close family members. It wasn't like the first time, with all the fuss and the big white dress. This time, it was more real, more about us and the commitment we were making to move forward, together. Standing there, repeating those vows, it felt like we were acknowledging everything we'd been through and still choosing each other. Our families were our rock, always there, offering a shoulder to cry on or an ear to listen. It amazed me how much strength you can draw from the people who love you, even when you feel like you're at your lowest. We started setting new routines, making sure we dedicated time just for us, whether it was a date night or just a quiet evening at home. It was about making us a priority again, showing that we both wanted this to work. Intimacy was another thing. It didn't come back all at once, like flipping a switch. It was slow, sometimes awkward, but there was a new depth to it. It felt like we were getting to know each other all over again, but in a deeper, more meaningful way. Talking about the issues that led to the affair was tough. It meant opening up about things we'd both rather forget, but it was necessary. We had to face what happened head on, understand it, so we could move past it. The idea of another getaway could have been a trigger, but we approached it differently this time. It was about healing, about finding that connection again. And surprisingly, it worked. Being away from the everyday stresses, just focusing on us, it reminded me of why we fell in love in the first place. That getaway was a turning point. We laughed more, talked more, and I could feel the love that had been buried under all the hurt and anger slowly coming back to the surface. Looking towards the future now, it's with a sense of hope. I won't pretend it's all fixed, that everything's perfect, but we're both committed to this journey, to rebuilding what we have. It's going to be long and probably not easy, but for the first time in a long time, it feels possible. We're moving forward, together.
I met my wife through coworkers one year after I got the job. I was 24 and she was 23. We fell for each other right away and maintained good rapport with everyone in the office through years of our relationship. We got married and had 2 kids. After our kids were born, my wife started working from home. When they left for college, I planned on starting a new hobby with my wife. We were still in the midst of deciding what to do when her lies became revealed. I arrived home from work late again on one particularly horrible day, exhausted because I had to endure a painfully awkward budget meeting involving a coworker that fancies me. She asked me more questions than anyone else during the meeting, and the way she looked at me as she spoke made everyone else in the room wonder what her intentions were. However, I was a married man that loved his wife dearly and respected the laws of marriage. So, even when this woman entered my office to properly ask me out on a date, I kindly declined and showed her my wedding ring. She was surprised and apologized, claiming that she didn't notice my ring before. She said she was going through a divorce herself with someone else in the office. She invited me to call her if I ever felt like getting out of the house for a few hours. Fast forward a few months from that day to the day I arrived home from the meeting where she was clearly still attempting to get my attention. I walked straight up the stairs to our bedroom like I always do, pushing the door open to find my wife having sex with a man from my office. I involuntarily screamed, which made my wife start yelling in alarm and sent the intruder flying out of our house. Hardly thinking about it, I heaved my briefcase at his head, hitting him repeatedly with it as he scrambled to get off my wife. When he managed to stand up, I dropped the briefcase to punch him in the face. My wife ran out of the room and 2 seconds later along with her AP. He must have driven home with just his boxers on because his clothes were still on the floor. I sat on the floor in disbelief at what I had just seen. My wife came back into the room, then just cried and apologized, unsure of what else to say. What could she say? I literally walked in on her cheating on me. Eventually, I found the strength to stand up, glaring at my soon-to-be ex as she cleaned up around our bedroom. She was making herself busy because she was waiting for me to tell her what was going to happen. Funny how dependent she seemed on my word, given the situation. I already knew who she was sleeping with and planned on firing him immediately. It was then that I remembered it was the same man my flirtatious coworker named as her soon-to-be ex. As I choked back tears, I asked her why she did it. She said she didn't know and that perhaps she was getting bored with our sex life. I told her that wasn't a good enough excuse and that she should have told me how she felt or suggested we try something new. We could have overcome it if she gave us the chance. Well, just as I feared, it turned out this affair was going on for some time. Without my wife's knowledge, I told her parents what was going on. They wouldn't allow her to come live with them, so I decided to stay in my parents' guest house until I could prove her infidelity in court. I was worried about how I was going to prove it, but that's when my flirty coworker came to my rescue. After I told her I found her soon-to-be ex with my wife, she explained that she was divorcing him because of videos and incriminating texts she found on his computer. They were all between him and a woman she didn't know, but now she knew it was my wife. She apologized that I was going through the same thing as her and that she couldn't have warned me sooner. She provided me with copies of the incriminating evidence to use in court against my wife. As my wife moved into the small and filthy apartment she could afford, her infidelity in our marriage was proven and the divorce was finalized. She expressed her constant emotional torment and desire to take back everything she had done. Our adult children and her parents haven't spoken to her or visited her. Thankfully, I'm still managing my department at work and quite well off. My children visit me often and we've all managed to create a new life that doesn't involve my ex-wife or the sorrow that she could have brought upon us. OP, I'm so sorry you went through this. It's so fortunate that things worked out the way they did. You're a wise man made wiser by having to endure this life challenge. She used the poor and selfish excuse of boredom to betray you and break her marital vows. She was well aware of what she was doing, and you most likely did the best thing you could have done by divorcing her so you could move on with your life. Although your children were adults, it's apparent that what she did affected them as well. Thank goodness you've all managed to create a new normal and live a happy life. I wish you all the best of luck and good fortune. Now for today's second story. My wife was 35 and I was 36 when she was informed of an upcoming high school reunion. We arranged for a babysitter for that night and immediately started looking forward to it. I wouldn't know anyone, but it was really exciting for me to get to meet her old friends. I met my wife one fateful night in a bar that was on the same street we worked on. She worked as a hairdresser and I worked in a print shop. The first thing I noticed was how beautiful her hair was. Then I saw her eyes and I knew she was going to be a fascination of mine for an unimaginable length of time. The first thing she said to me was that I needed a haircut, but I'm getting off topic. We were married and welcomed 2 kids into the world. Our marriage wasn't perfect, and there were a few times we considered taking time apart, but as soon as it came time to pack a bag, neither of us could do it. There wasn't any infidelity at this point, so it felt like any disagreement or issue could be resolved and worked through. That's how marriage is supposed to work, isn't it? Our kids had a good childhood and never had to hear loud arguments. They were 13 and 16 when we started planning to attend her high school reunion. 2 weeks before the reunion, my wife added many high school friends to her Facebook. More than one of these were men, but most of them were married as well. I had no suspicions of anything until I heard the ding start. Multiple times throughout the time we were home from work together, I heard her phone ding. I started thinking I heard it when I was in the shower or on the toilet. I heard it while she was cooking and as we said goodnight to our kids. It was getting obviously excessive and she knew it. I finally asked her who was messaging her so often, and of course, she said it was high school friends talking about the reunion. Fair enough. She put her phone on vibrate, so it seemed like the messages suddenly stopped. After she fell asleep one night, I heard her phone vibrate. I stared at the ceiling for 30 minutes before I heard it again and gave in. What I read was unnerving. It was a string of messages between her and a man that would be at the high school reunion. In one of the messages, she mentioned how wonderful and exciting it will be to see him again. In another, she asked if any fun he'd had over the years compared to what they did when they were young. He replied that no, he was only able to have that level of fun with her. She responded to that by saying that perhaps they'd have fun at the reunion or sometime after that. He pointed out that this sounded like she'd want to keep seeing him after the reunion, and she didn't deny it. Well, I confronted her about it, and she apologized profusely. She said he seemed lonely and like he needed friends. I told her this was no excuse to be talking to him about having fun or continuing to see each other after the reunion. I also asked if they'd been intimate in the past, and she said no. She didn't appear to be lying, but knowing what I know now, I'd say she most definitely was. She asked me if we could still go to the reunion, and I said yes, figuring she hadn't really broken my trust at this point, and I'd be there to watch everything. Little did I know she continued talking to that man, maybe even more than before. She had her hair and nails done before the night out. During the night in question, it took the man a few minutes to get up the nerve to reintroduce himself to my wife while I stood beside her. I hated the feeling he gave me. He could barely look at me, and I could see how desperate he was to connect with my wife. She looked at him similarly, but with more care about me. She introduced me kindly, but that didn't faze this man. He sat close enough to maintain conversation with her, and throughout the night, everyone drank except me. My wife was visibly intoxicated by the time I had to go to the bathroom. I told her I'd be right back. When I came back out, she was gone, and so was he. I looked around and asked one of the women from the reunion where they went. She said they stepped outside for a cigarette. My wife didn't smoke, but I thought maybe she just stepped outside to keep him company. When I went outside, I didn't see them anywhere. I checked the inside of all the cars in the parking lot. I tried calling her cell phone, and she didn't answer. I was stumped and angry. I waited 45 minutes before finally getting a text from her. It read that she'd agreed to go with the man to the gas station down the road, but since they were close to our house, he was planning to drop her off there. I knew this was bullshit. I arrived home 10 minutes later to find that the babysitter had left and our kids were asleep. My wife was asleep on the couch wearing only her panties. I woke her up immediately and demanded an explanation. She was so out of it, but honestly, a part of me believed she was faking it. In her incomprehensible way, she tried to say that he gave her a ride home because he wanted to talk about stuff he was going through. Trying to get more out of her while she was like this was impossible, so I waited until the morning. Before she woke up, our teenagers told me about the night they had with the babysitter. I could hardly pay attention, but it was good to know they were asleep when she arrived home and didn't see anything odd. As soon as my wife got up, I asked her about what happened. She complained that her memory was shot and said she felt really bad. Really bad for leaving me there and really bad for getting so drunk. Well, a few hours later, she broke down and told me she just remembered what really happened. I think she just knew I was going to find out somehow. She told me he asked her to come outside with him and talk, and she agreed. He invited her into his car because it was cold and she didn't see the harm in that. Then she said he forced her to kiss and have sex with him. She was crying, but I swore it was because she was caught. I told her to let me check her phone, and she tried to refuse and make excuses. I grabbed it from her and locked myself in the bathroom. Lo and behold, she had time to text the man and say what they did was a mistake. But before that, days before the reunion, messages proved they planned to sneak away at some point, have sex, and even considered the possibility of her spending the night at his house. This was it. Our marriage was over. When I opened the bathroom door, she was ghostly white and staring at me as if her life depended on it. I told her we were done, that I wouldn't be able to be with her again knowing she planned and went through with cheating on me. She sobbed and almost inaudibly pleaded for my forgiveness. I told her that although she was drunk when it happened, she planned this out beforehand. She decided to give herself away even though she was faithfully mine for all these years. I lost all motivation to protect her as my wife because she chose to invite another man in. I didn't think she could feel any worse, but she did after I said that. She curled up in a ball, crying her heart out while I did her a few favors. I arranged for the kids to have a sleepover at their friend's house so that they may not be as traumatized later in life. I packed as much of my wife's clothes and belongings as possible. I called her parents and informed them of what was happening, suggesting they come pick up their daughter. They did. Since she refused or was unable to get in their car, I put her in, followed by her stuff. Her parents tried to apologize to me and talk about it, but I didn't acknowledge them beyond hello and goodbye. My wife tried more than once to get out of the car, but they warned her that if she didn't come with them now, they wouldn't allow her to stay with them until she found somewhere else to go. Hearing that sent her into a trance. She knew her life as she knew it was over. She sat still like a statue as they drove her away. Through the divorce and custody hearings, she was crying as silently as possible. Our teens chose to live with me, continuing to live in the same house and attend the same school. Their mom had the decency to admit her wrongdoing and co with me to the best of her ability. Since years have passed, I'm able to basically be friends with her. I'm thankful to myself every day that I didn't stay with her and try to work it out. It would have been so much worse for me, better for her. She chose this path and I went willingly. She hated it every step of the way, but maybe she deserved that. She's still living with her parents, even though she's moved out more than once since all this happened. I guess she's had trouble finding happiness after her family life ended. I remarried 1 year ago, and she's a wonderful, faithful woman so far. I wanted to share my story so that others going through some horrible life-altering reality will maintain hope. Opie, sharing your story will certainly spread hope that anyone can find a future for themselves beyond what they've known. Unfamiliar doesn't have to be intimidating. We're only human after all and wouldn't have to face anything we aren't strong enough for. That being said, I'm sorry that you've experienced this betrayal. Even when reality sank in, you stuck with the decision you needed to make for yourself. It can be extremely difficult to see past emotions and what you've become accustomed to. But when someone has broken trust like this, sometimes the only option is to start over new. Rely on yourself, family, friends, and professionals for support and advice. There's always a way to keep moving forward in life. Thank you for sharing your story. I wish nothing but good fortune for you and your kids. Thank you for taking the time to listen to today's stories. If you enjoyed listening, please feel free to like and subscribe if you haven't already. Also, comment below with your thoughts on what happened.
Let me tell you about the whirlwind I called my life. Not too long ago. It was like living two lives. One where I was the devoted wife to my sick husband, and the other, well, that was the side of me I kept hidden under lock and key, or so I thought. So, there I was, in this swanky apartment that looked like it was ripped straight out of a luxury magazine, all thanks to my lover. He had this place decked out just for our little escapades. Kissing him goodbye felt like shedding a skin, one I had to wear whenever I went back to playing the role of the caring wife. My husband, bless his soul, was deep into his chemo for lung cancer, thinking his loving wife was off bending into a pretzel at a yoga retreat. If only. The real kicker came the next day. I was lounging around, enjoying the kind of freedom that only comes when you think you've outsmarted your old life. Then my phone rang. It was my husband's doctor, sounding all serious and worried, thinking I was right there holding my husband's hand or something. He told me the news straight up. My husband's condition was getting worse. I put on my best worried wife voice, but the second I hung up, it was like a switch flipped. Shopping, I thought. That'll make me feel better. After all, I was about to inherit everything, right? Wrong. Fast forward to the weekend, and my lover, being the spontaneous guy he is, suggested we hit up this fancy hotel for a getaway. Picture this. Me, in my best dress, stepping into the lobby like I owned the place, and who do I see? My husband's best friend, looking right at us. My heart sank, but I laughed it off, throwing him a casual wave like I was just there for the brunch or something. Inside, though, I was panicking. Had he seen too much? That weekend was supposed to be an escape, a brief dive into a world where consequences didn't exist. But every laugh, every whispered promise felt hollow, knowing that my web of lies was getting more tangled by the second. I kept telling myself I was in control, that I could manage the fallout. But who was I kidding? My husband's friend wasn't just some random guy. He was loyal to a fault, and I knew deep down, my days of playing both sides were numbered. So, there you have it, how I danced on the edge, thinking I was clever enough to keep my two worlds from colliding. Spoiler alert, I wasn't. And as for that sinking feeling in my stomach, turns out it was my conscience, trying to break through the surface. Too bad I didn't listen until it was too late. Please take a moment to like and subscribe. It helps us create more content you love. Thank you for your support. Imagine this. Me, living it up at this high-end hotel with my lover, completely oblivious to the storm brewing just around the corner. It was like I was in my own little bubble, thinking I was untouchable. But here's where it gets juicy. I left a trail of breadcrumbs so big, you'd think I wanted to get caught. My lover's watch, my lipstick on too many glasses, and receipts everywhere. I was reckless, and boy, did it come back to bite me. So, there I was, thinking I was slick, not knowing my husband's friend was lurking, snapping photos like we were celebrities on the down low. This guy, he was like a brother to my husband, and there he was, gathering all the ammo he needed. It's funny how you never see the knife coming until it's right there. Huh? Fast forward to me waltzing back into my house, acting like the doting wife who'd just been away on a spiritual retreat. My husband was there, looking frielier than ever, but with this smile that just about broke my heart. He said he was just so thankful for all my support through his chemo. Support, right? That word felt like a slap, especially with all the dirt I had just swept under the rug. But did I stop? Take a wild guess. Now, here's the kicker. Amidst all this chaos, my husband, with every ounce of strength he had left, gives me this necklace. It was stunning, sure, but it was more than that to him. He said it symbolized his hope for the future, our future. And what did I do? I just took it, barely a thank you, escaping my lips. I was eyeing it like it was just another piece to my collection, not the beacon of hope it was meant to be. Cold, right? Yeah, that was me. Every time I looked in the mirror, wearing that necklace, all I saw was the weight of my lies and the coldness of my own heart staring back. It's one thing to play with fire, but another to freeze everything out. That necklace, supposed to be a symbol of love and hope, felt more like chains around my neck, a constant reminder of the betrayal I was living. This is how I let greed and lust cloud my judgment, ignoring the love that was right in front of me. My husband, battling cancer, still found it in him to show me love, and there I was, plotting my next escape. Makes you think, doesn't it? About what we take for granted, about the choices we make. Let me tell you, looking back now, I'd give anything to go back and choose differently. But life doesn't work that way, does it? You play the cards you're dealt, and sometimes, you play them all wrong. Just when you think you've got it all figured out, life throws you a curveball that knocks you straight off your feet. That's exactly what happened to me, and boy, was it a doozy. So, grab a seat. You're not gonna believe this. It all started with a phone call from the hospital. I was in the middle of plotting my next rendezvous when the news hit me like a ton of bricks. My husband, the one I'd been sneaking around on, was getting better. Yeah, you heard that right. The cancer that was supposed to take him away from me, giving me a one-way ticket to freedom and wealth, was retreating. I put on my best, overjoyed wife, voice, but inside, I was a mess. My golden ticket was slipping right through my fingers. As if that wasn't enough to knock me off my game, my lover, the one person I thought I could count on for some excitement and escape, started showing his true colors. Turns out, Mr. Perfect was swimming in debt up to his eyeballs. Our steamy, passionate encounters turned into him whining about his financial woes, looking at me like I was some sort of ATM. Romance? Out the window. Now, it was all about the money. And just when I thought things couldn't get any more complicated, I find out I'm pregnant. Yeah, the cherry on top of this disaster cake. With my husband on the mend and my lover turning into a leech, I was stuck in a nightmare. Who's the father? Could I pass the baby off as my husband's and keep this charade going? The questions haunted me, day and night. I kept the pregnancy a secret, dodging questions and hiding my growing belly. The stress was unbearable. Here I was, juggling a sick husband who was suddenly not so sick, a lover who was more interested in my wallet than me, and a pregnancy that could blow my whole world to pieces. So, I did what I do best, put on a brave face and plotted. I'd figure out a way to keep the baby a secret until I could come up with a plan. Maybe my husband would never have to know. Maybe my lover would hit the road if I cut off the cash flow. But deep down, I knew I was just delaying the inevitable. The truth has a way of coming out, and when it does, it's like a hurricane, tearing through your life and leaving nothing but chaos in its wake. That's the thing about secrets and lies. They're like a house of cards, delicate and fragile. And mine was about to come crashing down. Okay, so you think you've heard it all? Buckle up, 'cause this chapter of my life is a doozy. It's like, one minute you're juggling your secrets like a pro, and the next, it all comes crashing down so hard, you don't even know what hit you. Let's rewind a bit. There I was, thinking I could outsmart everyone, living my double life and loving it. But, as they say, all good things must come to an end, right? An end it did, with a bang. It all went down one seemingly normal evening. My husband's buddy, the one I always thought was a bit of a pushover, turns out he had a backbone after all. He couldn't take the lies and the deceit anymore. So what does he do? He shows my husband the photos. Yeah, those photos. The ones of me and my lover cozying up in places I shouldn't have been. The look on my husband's face when he confronted me, I'll never forget it. It was like he was seeing me for the first time. And man, the disappointment and betrayal in his eyes cut deeper than any knife. Is it true? He asked, voice barely a whisper, but loaded with so much pain. Do you really need to ask? I wanted to say, but I didn't. Instead, I did what I do best. I lied. Flat out denied everything. But my husband, he'd done his homework. Hired a private investigator. Can you believe that? And just like that, my world started crumbling. Photos, videos, texts, you name it, the evidence was overwhelming. There was no coming back from this. My husband, the man I vowed to stand by, in sickness and in health, looked at me with such cold determination, it sent shivers down my spine. He filed for divorce, and he made damn sure I wouldn't get a dime. Everything we'd built together, gone in the blink of an eye because of my selfishness. The worst part? There was a part of me that thought I could sweet-talk my way out of it, use my charm to soften the blow. But facing him in that moment, seeing the resolve in his eyes, I knew. This was it. The game was over. Leaving our home for the last time, I realized I'd lost more than just my marriage and my comfortable life. I'd lost myself, my dignity, and any scrap of respect he might have still had for me. So there I was, out on my own, with nothing but my regrets and a harsh lesson learned. Turns out, living a lie, no matter how thrilling it might seem, always comes with a price. And trust me, it was a price I paid in full. Ever heard the saying, be careful what you wish for? Yeah, well, I'm living proof of that. My life? It's like a cautionary tale straight out of a soap opera, only there's no commercial breaks or happy endings. Let me fill you in on the latest drama. So, I ditched my sick husband for my lover, thinking I was about to live the high life. Big mistake. Huge. Turns out, my lover's as broke as a joke. We went from living in a swanky apartment to getting booted out when he couldn't pay up. Ended up in this tiny, moldy flat that smelled like despair and broken dreams. And if you think that's bad, Wait till you hear about the pregnancy. Yep, found out I was expecting. You'd think that might bring us closer, right? Wrong. My lover started acting all weird, questioning if the baby was even his. Talk about a kick in the teeth. There I was, pregnant and practically penniless, with a guy who suddenly acted like I was some stranger he regretted letting in. But hey, it gets better. Or, well, worse. The stress of everything, my crumbling love life, the impending single motherhood, the guilt eating at me for abandoning my husband. It all took a toll on me. Big time. I started feeling really off, you know? Ended up at the doctor's more times than I can count, and bam, got slapped with a diagnosis. Some chronic condition made worse by stress. Irony much? Now, I'm spending more time in bed than a cat, weak and sick, wondering how the heck my life turned into this mess. Living with my lover, or should I say, freeloader, became a daily reminder of how far I'd fallen. Our conversations? They were more like arguments drenched in bitterness and regret. This isn't what I signed up for, he'd say, as if I was the only one responsible for this disaster. And me? I couldn't even muster the energy to fight back. Too sick, too tired, too lost in my own misery. It's funny, in a tragic sort of way. I left my husband because I thought I'd find happiness and riches elsewhere. Instead, I found myself trapped in a life more suffocating than the one I ran away from. Alone, broke, and sick. This wasn't the plan. Not by a long shot. So here I am, lying in this dingy flat, staring at the ceiling and thinking about all the choices that led me here. My husband's probably moved on, finding happiness without me, while I'm just a shadow of the woman I used to be. If there's a moral to my story, it's that the grass ain't always greener. Sometimes, it's just astroturf painted to look pretty, hiding all the ugliness underneath. Guess it's true what they say. Karma really is a, well, you know. And let me tell you, she's got a wicked sense of humor. Let me tell you, hitting rock bottom has a way of clarifying things, like a slap in the face you never saw coming. My story? It's one of those, how the mighty have fallen, tales and fall I did, hard and fast, from a life I thought I had all figured out. First off, my husband's recovery. You'd think I'd be happy, right? Wrong. The whole town was buzzing, celebrating his miraculous comeback from the brink. And him? He was the star of the show, with a new lady by his side. Someone who was there for him when I chose not to be. I watched them from the shadows, my heart twisted with envy and a gut-wrenching regret. Seeing him so alive, so loved, it was like a punch to the gut. Then came the divorce papers. That moment when reality hits you square in the face, and there's no running, no hiding. I was alone, the illness I had shrugged off becoming a tangible reminder of my body's betrayal, just as I had betrayed. My lover, the one I risked it all for, bailed. The sickness, the lack of money, it was too much for him. There I was, abandoned, just like I had abandoned my husband. Court day was a spectacle, but not the kind I'd ever wanted to star in. My husband, looking healthier and happier than I'd seen him in years, didn't even spare me a glance. His testimony was calm, collected, a recounting of my betrayal that left no room for doubt. The judge's expression said it all. There was no sympathy there for me, not a shred. The gavel sounded, and just like that, it was over. The divorce was finalized, stripping me of everything I once held dear. But the real kicker? My husband donated a hefty chunk of our assets to cancer research, a final goodbye wrapped in a bow of revenge and closure. It was poetic, really, in a twisted sort of way. Walking out of that courthouse, the weight of my choices bore down on me like never before. I had lost everything. The wealth I coveted, the love I took for granted, and even my health, which I had always assumed would stand by me, faithful when no one else was. And there it was, the bitter end of a chapter one had written with my own selfish desires. No wealth, no love, no health. Just me, and the stark realization of what my betrayal and greed had cost me. It was a hard pill to swallow, realizing that the price of my actions was a life devoid of the very things I had sought to secure. So, what's the moral of this sorry tale? Maybe it's that life has a way of balancing the scales, of teaching us lessons in the harshest ways possible. Or maybe it's simpler than that. Maybe it's just about the choices we make and the inevitable consequences that follow. Either way, here I am, telling you my story not as a cautionary tale, but as a reminder. A reminder that sometimes, the things we think we want the most can end up